Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. Here on American Voices, we celebrate all that America has to offer. So after hearing from people who do wonderful things and people's life stories, we want to also celebrate the land. So each week, we invite authors to talk about a favorite place in America. This time we hear from Amor Towles. His recent book is A Gentleman in Moscow. Here's Amor Towles.
My name is Amor Towles, and one of my favorite places in the world is a small town on Fire Island off the coast of Long Island. You know, I'm not going to mention, let's call it Beach Town, USA. One of the reasons I don't name it, I'm not going to name it, is because when we first began going there, we bought a house in this town, kind of on a whim, in essence, because we couldn't believe that there was this beautiful sort of 1950s-esque beach town sitting 50 miles from downtown Manhattan. But shortly after I got there, I mentioned to one of my neighbors, he said, how do you enjoy the town? I said, oh, it's terrific. And in fact, I was just telling my friend in New York City, what a wonderful place it is. And he stopped me and he said, you did what? You told your friend what a wonderful place it is? And I said, yeah, of course. And he said, listen, that's really, you don't want to do that. You shouldn't do that. It's part of the town. We don't tell other people how nice the town is, because I sort of live in fear that 50 miles from Manhattan, if they started telling everybody what a great town it is, that more and more people would come. So they're constantly trying to fend off the discovery of the town. The whole point of this town is to remain under the radar, as it were. And they have sort of these funny rules that support that. So like an example is that one of the rules in town, by law, when you get on the ferry, you cannot bring a bike with you. If you bring a bike and you want to send it to the island, they will deliver it 24 hours after you come to the ferry dock. And that is to avoid anybody being able to come over for the day and take a bike ride. So it seems kind of off-putting in a way, but it's really about these 300, 400 families in the town trying to protect the fact that it is the way it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, with everybody walking around in barefoot, without their keys, without wallets, and really because the children are the ones who run the town. Because it's a place without cars, because it's a place where there's not people coming and going, there's no restaurants, there's no nightclubs. You can be 6 years old and you can walk out the door, the screen door slams, and you've got the run of the town to yourself. So as you go outside and wander around, you will see little packs of 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds who are wandering the town on their bikes with total freedom that you couldn't find in many parts of America today. You take all the idiosyncrasies of the town. I don't think my sister, for instance, even though we were raised together and we both live in New York and we share many, many friends and many aspects of our personality, she would not have enjoyed this town in summer as much as I do. She would not have wanted to be in a town without cars and without shops and without restaurants, I don't think. Which is fine. But in that sense, the town is kind of selecting what kind of person would be happy here. Eventually you feel like, yeah, the town thinks I'm the right kind of person to be here. Something about the bare feet and the boardwalks and the shingled houses and the big empty beach all somehow come together and we're a good fit. My son is now 16, but around the time he was 6, he had lost a pair of Crocs. And my wife said, Stokely, you're old enough, maybe he was 7, 8 at this point, you're old enough that you should be able to keep track of your own shoes. If you lose the Crocs, again, you're going to have to use your allowance in order to buy them yourself. And so it's the end of the summer. We've got, maybe 3 hours until the ferry comes or something like that. And my wife says, oh, Stokely, you're all packed, but, where are your Crocs? And he looks at you like, uh-oh, Mom, oh, Dad. I said, all right, we'll retrace your steps yesterday. And the great thing about this then little adventure that we went on in search of your shoes is, for me, was a window on what his daily life was like. Because some of it I know and some of it I don't. But to find his Crocs, to retrace his steps, like you couldn't, we went to 50 different places, right? Because, we went hunting for softballs in the woods behind the softball fence. Okay, so you go there, into the woods. And there's like, then we went and got ice cream. They say, okay, well, then we went to this beach. But then later we went to that beach, and then we went back to this part of the beach. You're kind of like, okay, and then we found that we were crabbing on the dock, and it's like, oh my God, it's endless. In the course of whatever it was, 8 hours, 12 hours, he had been to 100 different places with, different people. And so literally we were going onto the ferry dock to meet the ferry, and there in the middle of the dock is one croc sitting right in the middle of the dock. And my son is like, that's one of my shoes. There it is. And he suddenly turns to me and he says, Dad, I've got a question. I said, yeah, so what? He says, since we found one of the crocs, do I only have to pay for half of the crocs? Good question, right? But yeah, so my point being that, I think that any time that as a youth you have that kind of freedom, where in the course of a day you're going to go to 100 places and you go from crabbing to softball hunting to, getting ice cream with your friends, there's no question that's going to be something you will remember your whole life. And so as a parent, it's very nice to sort of be able to present to your child the opportunity to, live a day like that, to live in essence like Tom Sawyer, even for a few weeks in the summer. We had our last summer in this town 2 years ago. We've moved on. So it's very, very sad for me. It was very bittersweet to realize that, okay, the realities of your family and of your life are going to make you then move on. So maybe that makes the place even more precious to me in that sense, because I know that we had it as a family for this, 15, 16 years, and that I don't get to appreciate it on a daily basis in the way that I used to.
Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.